Welcome to this video about language, culture, and assessment challenges that we face when we consider intercultural and pragmatic competence. We will begin with this quote by Albino Fantini. "No one doubts the importance of language in our lives. In fact, it would be hard to imagine life without the ability to communicate. Yet, because language has always been present for as long as we can remember, we seldom consider the role and impact of the specific system of symbols that we use on a daily basis. This is true for our native language system, and it is just as true when dealing with people across different language culture backgrounds." Alvini goes on to discuss many of the ways that language mediates our lives. For example, Alvini mentions that language is a vehicle for disseminating and creating meaning, concepts, and experiences. Language is both a product of culture and a shaper of culture. Language both influences our perspectives and contradicts our perspectives. Language transports us through time, beyond the present moment, and beyond our own personal experiences. And language can create what doesn't exist. This discussion was included because not only does it discuss the fundamental nature of language to our lives as humans, but also because it provides background for understanding why assessment is so difficult. It highlights that language is a useful tool, but we often fail to consider the nuances and complexities it brings to and supports in our lives. We turn our attention to these nuances and complexities at this time. First off, there is an incredible amount of variability across cultures, subcultures, and individuals. These comic excerpts discussing the word Latinx as a non-binary term highlight that reality. In the center comic, we see the issue that yielded the emergence of Latinx as a term. On the rightmost comic, we see that it emerged among a specific population of Spanish speakers, specifically Spanish speakers within the United States, but it wasn't terribly common throughout the entire Spanish-speaking world. On the leftmost image, we see the subjectivity of the author, a decision to use E as an alternative non-binary ending. This discussion highlights that even on a purely lexical and grammatical level, a single word is incredibly powerful. It may build community and inclusion, or it can cause confusion. Which brings us to our next point. Communication is co-constructed, a partnership. With respect to assessment, it can be difficult for an outsider to evaluate communicative success. Further, self-assessment can be complicated because speakers aren't typically aware of what works, what their strengths are. They only tend to know that something has gone wrong. And further, because speakers may only know that something has gone wrong, but not why it went that way, they don't always know how to communicate successfully in intercultural contexts. In other words, proficiency is not necessarily correlated with intercultural and pragmatic competence. And finally, variation across contexts is incredible. For example, in some situations, languages, and groups, "How are you?" is used as a greeting. And in others, it's a genuine question. Further, the response may or may not require elaboration. There are no rules that apply to all languages and all contexts within all languages.